This day is called the Feast of Crispin. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispin. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispin. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so base. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day.
Actually, it must be 29 years, I suppose, almost to a day, since I first played here, in the great Lillian's day. Used to be much further back at the end. Under the stalls used to go back at least 3 more rows. That passage behind there wasn't there. Of course, all this proscenium has taken up a good bit of the theatre, too, you see.
Can we go back further than the 29 years that it's been since you first appeared at the Old Vic, now? Can I ask you something about All Saints Choir School a long time ago? Acting seems to have been a very important part of the curriculum there.
Yes, it was. We had an extremely lively, really highly artistic priest on the staff. Because you must remember that church, All Saints Margaret Street, is a high Anglican church. As we used to call it in those days, it was Anglo-Catholic. And the priesthood was likely, in those days, went there about 1916, I suppose, to be rather indulge in the flamboyant. These lads, these priests, used to would love to think that they hobnobbed with Sybil Thorndike, and of course be overjoyed absolutely to have ever met Forbes Robertson in their lives.
Actors seem to have come to see a great many of the performances. I think when you were 10 years old, Ellen Terry said, the boy who plays the part of Brutus is already a great actor. Can you remember playing Brutus?
Oh, yes, I do. I do indeed. My father had a story about Forbes Robertson. I never believed it, but my father used to tell it, so I'll tell it for what it's worth. I don't know what it's worth in truth, but he said that he met Forbes Robertson on that occasion. And as he put it, Forbes Robertson had tears in his eyes when my father said, my little boy isn't bad, is he, or something. And he said that Forbes Robertson said, my dear man, he is Brutus, he said. Well, I don't see how I can have been at 10, but still.
Your father was a high Anglican clergyman.
He was a high Anglican clergyman.
Did he have a great deal of influence on your life?
Oh,
Early
yes.
life?
Oh, yes, very much, very much. You see, both my brother and I started, at least with a great sense of ritual.
And it was these elaborate rituals that gave you the idea, perhaps, of acting?
Yes. Oh, yes, and my father's great prowess in the pulpit.
Did your father approve of you going on the stage?
Well, as a matter of fact, although my relationship with him had been extremely distant all my youth, I was terrified of him. He was a very frightening father figure, Victorian father figure. I absolutely worshipped and adored my mother, who died when I was 13 years old, and I often think and say that perhaps I've never got over it. Anyway, my father had to take over, not knowing me very much. I think to him I was rather an unnecessary child. I don't blame him at all, because I was probably very fat and absolutely brainless. But finally, when my brother went to India as an Indian rubber planter, not as an Indian rubber planter, but as an English rubber planter in India, I was filled with the glamour of what my brother was doing, and when we'd seen him off on his boat in Tilbury, we got back home to Letchworth, where my father was rector. I said, well, when can I follow Dickie out to India. Father, please. About 1 or 2 years. I don't want to go to the university. And my father said, you're talking nonsense. You're going to be an actor.
And this was a complete surprise to you?
Yes, it was. I was amazed that that he'd thought things out for me at all, and B, that he'd thought things out that far. And that he'd had I secretly knew that he was right, that I ought to be an actor.
And so, after this direct exhortation from your father, you went off to the Central School. And there you met an extraordinary woman called Elsie Fogarty.
Yes.
What kind of a woman was she?
Very powerful woman. Very powerful. I remember she said 2 things, one which was quite illuminating and one brilliantly illuminating. And I had to come up to take this scholarship. And so I went up for my examination. And I remember going into the Albert Hall, knocking on the door, asking where the Central School was, being directed to it, and looking in at the Albert Hall on my way and seeing this enormous arena. And I really thought that afternoon I was going to have to be down there all by myself, and that the place was going to be full to hear me do my examination. I really thought that's how ingenuous and stupid I was. However, I made my way to this place, and I was perfectly delighted to see that I was only going to be put 10 yards away from Elsie Fogarty, who was sitting behind a table like this, waiting for me to begin. And I did these, which is the 7 Ages of Man. And afterwards, she said, come down, boy, come down. And she sat me here. And she said, I think you've got a little too strong an idea of the importance of action. It's rather funny. Anybody could say that about me then, age 17. She said, for instance, when you say, it is not really necessary to make fencing movements while you are saying sudden and quick to quarrel. And then she did a marvelous thing, an unforgettable thing, unforgettable thing. She said, you have a weakness here. And she took her little finger and placed it down there, like that. And it's funny. I must have shown some sort of shyness or something in Beetlebrow, saying, she said, you have a weakness here. Remember that. Well, something made me slap on all that putty all over my face for years and years afterwards, didn't it? And I dare say it was then.
And after the school, you began looking for work. Had you any idea then what kind of an actor you wanted to be?
No. No, I hadn't, honestly. I knew that experience was necessary, and that's what I was after. I was very vague. Very vague. I had a sort of burning ambition. I didn't know how to place it or what to do with it. I think possibly one of the most strongly contributing facts towards such an ambition was my upbringing. The fact is, I think, that the atmosphere of genteel poverty is probably almost the most fertile ground for ambition that there can be, because you simply say, I want to get out. I'm going to get out. When I get out of this, I will show them. I will show them. I will show them, without having the faintest idea how you're going to show them or what you're going to do to show them. So I simply had this driving. I'm going to be a simply smashing actor. I'm going to be a smashing actor. How? Probably I wanted emotional parts more than any other.
Your first important job was at Birmingham, wasn't it? Birmingham.
That was a very sought-after thing. That if you were a serious actor and went... there were 2 types of actors, one very much less than the other. There was the sort of old boy type of actor. Get a jolly good juvenile part, old boy, on the road, old boy, for £12 a week, old boy. That's the life, old chap. And eventually you get 40 quid a week, old man. There was one very strong influence in the theatre of going into the theatre for what you get out of it, and for the sort of success you make, the sort of clothes you could wear, the sort of golf you could afford to play. Now, there was a shorter list of people who were after, dare one say, higher things. And I suppose my nature made me belong to that group. And I was after things like the Birmingham Rep.
Amongst the parts you played there were Tony Lumpkin, Harold in Tennyson's play of that name, and Uncle Vanya. Did you think you were best in? If any, of course.
Well, Uncle Vanya I played when I was 19. I think I must have shown promise and emotional content in my performance. I must have shown some emotional power, I think.
And then into the West End, I was just going to... You played Stand-Up in Journey's End, you played Beau Geste, which were very showy star parts. Now, and it might be construed that at this time it looks as if you weren't so much interested in the classics as in being a very successful West End actor. Is there any truth in that?
I think I sort of knew, without, wanting to sound too prophetic, I think I sort of knew that I was going to climb towards something, that eventually I was going to, I thought, believed with my whole heart, right or wrong, reach some heights, and I knew that the path to such heights was a stony one. But in the meantime, I was very happy and content to be a young West End actor of a leading type, as in Beau Geste, for instance, and The Circle of Chalk.
On your way up, you had a very splendid association with Mr. Noel Coward.
Yeah.
You played what's known as the other part in Private Life.
Yeah.
How did you find working with Coward?
Thrilling. Very inspiriting. He was terribly funny. Very witty. I think Noel probably was the first man who took hold of me and made me think. He made me use my silly little brain. He taxed me with his sharpness and shrewdness and his brilliance and his brain, and it was point out when I was talking nonsense, which nobody else had ever done before, would give me a sense of the balance of right and wrong, would make me read it. Never read anything at all.
Whenever you can, indulging in very violent physical action on stage. Can you remember when you first started that?
Well, I remember first trying it. I was, of course, absolutely swept overboard by Douglas Fairbanks and John Barrymore in films. And indeed, John Barrymore playing Hamlet at the Haymarket was tremendously athletic in it, you know. It was part of their glamour. One thought of oneself, idiotically skinny as I was, one liked to think of oneself as sort of Tarzan. It appealed to the girls.
How do you keep yourself fit?
Well, now I keep myself very fit now. I have to. I go to a gym. I go to a gym twice or three times a week. Not merely to look at tremendous muscles, but well, I have to keep fit for my job. I'm determined to hold on to my job. I love it, but it's pretending doesn't involve a certain amount of overwork, because it does. But I sort of believe that I've seen a lot of contemporaries get a bit under the weather with such work, and I'm determined not to.
Coming back to 1935, you appeared in a play called The Ringmaster under your own management for the first time. Do you think you're a good manager?
Very hard question. It wasn't actually my management, it was Gilbert Miller's management, but he made me a partner in it because I bought the play. But the next play I did have my name over as Laurence Olivier Presents. I think I loved it, sure, but my generation's wish was to be that. The great ambition was to be an actor-manager, to have the responsibility, in fact, to be your own boss. Simple as that.
At that point in 1935 or thereabouts, did you think your career was a success or a failure?
About this time, as a matter of fact, an accident happened which made a big difference to me. I had just got engaged by Hugh Beaumont, H.M. Tennant and Hugh Beaumont, to play in a play by Frederick Lonsdale with Edna Best. And I had obviously been thinking a lot about them higher things, you know, Shakespeare. It was beginning to eat at me a bit that my present standard of work, my present kind of work was beginning to dissatisfy me rather violently. And it only took 2 days of rehearsal of this play to make me give the part up. Now, it was a very unfortunate circumstance, and it always is when an actor wants to give a part up, and it has to rely greatly upon the kindness of the manager. And I said, I'm terribly sorry. I somehow no longer feel this is my sort of work. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I feel I ought to be playing Romeo now. Actually, I had a sort of ambition to put Romeo on myself. Unfortunately, about 2 days after this happened, Bronson Albury sent for me and said John Gielgud wanted me to alternate with him the parts of Romeo and Mercutio. So it looked awfully as if I knew perfectly well that that was going to happen to me when I left this other play.
Which of those two parts did you prefer playing?
Oh, Romeo. Romeo.
That surprises me. I should have thought you were a natural Mercutio.
Well, yes, perhaps that's why. but I saw myself as Romeo. I was fighting a cause when I was playing Romeo because, understand, I've admired John Gielgud all my life with complete devotion. I've never thought of myself as quite the same actor as he is. They've got the same sort of actor. I've always thought that we were the reverses of the same coin, perhaps. I've seen, as if you had a coin, I'd seen the top half, John, all spiritual, all spirituality, all beauty, all abstract things, and myself, all earth, blood, earth, everything to do with earth, humanity, if you like, the baser part of humanity. I suppose I must have sensed a sort of possible rivalry between us that might last all our lives. I don't know, but I suppose it made me go for the other. Whatever it was that he had might have done that. That might have happened that way. But when I was playing Romeo, I was carrying a torch. I was trying to sell realism in Shakespeare. I believed in it with my whole soul. And I believed that Johnny was not doing that enough. I thought that he was paying attention to the exclusion of the earth to all music, all lyricism. And I was for the other side of the coin.
Then in 1937, you accepted an invitation from Tyrone de Guthrie to go to the Old Vic, and you opened with a full-length Hamlet. Now, how confident were you? It must have been an awful moment.
Yes, it was. But, you know, it was all or nothing. It was just all or nothing, and so the only thing to do was to open smack out with a part that I knew I'd be very sternly criticized in. John Gielgud had proved himself to be the Hamlet of his generation, that I was putting myself up in a kind of stupid rivalry and all that. But I thought, I'll have to take all that, because if I don't have a bash, I'll never learn anything at all. And obviously, Hamlet is a part of such enormous length and depth that you're bound to learn something through having played it.
When we go over to the studio, we're going to see a scene from the film that you made after the war of Hamlet. And it's the scene after you've been with the ghost, you come back and you make Horatio and the other two soldiers swear not to reveal what you've told them.
How is my noble lord?
What news, my lord?
Oh, wonderful. Would my lord tell it?
No. You will reveal it.
Not I, my lord.
How say you then? Would heart of man once think it? But you'll be secret.
Aye, my lord. My lord.
There's ne'er a villain dwelling in all Denmark. But he's an errant knave.
There needs no ghost, my lord, come from the grave to tell us this.
Why, right. You are in the right.
And so, without more circumstance at all, I hold it fit that we shake hands and part. You, as your business and desire, shall point you, for every man hath business and desire, such as it is. And for mine own poor part, look you, I'll go pray.
These are but wild and whirling words, my lord.
I'm sorry they offend you, heartily. Yes, faith, heartily.
There's no offense, my lord.
Yes, by St. Patrick, but there is, Horatio, a bunch of friends, too.
Touching this vision here, it is an honest ghost, that let me tell you. For your desire to know what is between us, oh, master it as you may. And now, good friends, as you are friends, scholars and soldiers, give me one poor request.
What is, my lord, we will?
Never make known what you have seen tonight.
My lord.
We will not,
Never,
but
my lord.
swear it.
In faith, my lord.
Not I, my lord, in faith.
On my sword.
We've sworn, my lord, already.
Indeed, upon my sword, indeed.
Oh, day and night, but this is wondrous strange.
And therefore, as a stranger, give it welcome. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. But come, never, so help you mercy, how strange or odd soe'er I bear myself, as I perchance hereafter shall think fit to put an antic disposition on. That you, at such times, seeing me, never shall, by the pronouncing of some doubtful phrase, as well, we know, or we could, and if we would, or such ambiguous giving out, denote you know aught of me. This do swear, so grace and mercy at your best need help you.
Swear.
Rest. Rest, perturbed spirit.
When, in 1937, you did Hamlet at the Old Vic, I believe you and Tony Guthrie worked out a rather original approach to the character.
Yes. That was inspired by a man whose name was Professor Ernest Jones, who wrote a book, title of which I'm afraid I can't remember. But it was concerning itself with Hamlet in the light of the Oedipus complex. Now, he made a really watertight case about this. And we believed in it thoroughly. And although I will not go so far as to say that that's all the play is about now, I did in those days. I thought that that was the absolute resolution of all the problems concerning Hamlet. And it, for what little use it had, it at least gave one a central idea which seemed to fulfill the great vacuum provided by all the crossed ideas about Hamlet, what he really was, what he really wasn't, whether he's a man of action, whether he wasn't a man of action. Now, he could perfectly safely be a man of action under the auspices of that particular idea that he couldn't kill the king because, subconsciously, of course, couldn't kill the king because he was guilty himself. Now, although now, I think there are many more things in Hamlet than that. But I still would favor the idea that if there is such a thing as an Oedipus complex, which we know perfectly well there is, it was not entirely absent from the royal court of Denmark.
How did you get on with Tyrone Guthrie as a director?
Oh, very well. Very well indeed. He had brilliant conceptions of crowd scenes, of shape, of grouping, of pace, of those sort of external things. He never seemed to touch into the heart of the matter very much. He always seemed to me in those days to be a wee bit nervous of the intimacies. I just remember that in Henry V, he would always say to me and Jessica Tandy, "You two go and do the love scene by yourselves, will you? I can't be bothered with that." And it seemed to me that he was a little bit shy of great human emotion.
In those first 2 seasons pre-war at the Old Vic, you played, amongst other things, Henry V, MacBeth, Iago, Coriolanus, and Coriolanus was really acclaimed as a great performance. But did you think it was your best performance of the series?
No, I'd obviously got much more proficient in that time. I'd been on the stage now 13 years, and I suppose my voice had got deeper. Coriolanus doesn't require a very deep mental faculty, I don't think. It doesn't require very great cerebral heights in the artist performing him. He's a very straightforward, reactionary son of a so-and-so, and it's quite easy to get onto him. And his thoughts are not deep. You've just got to appreciate what he is and make quite sure that he is a patrician, first and foremost, and that his pride is of the nature that he's too proud to even accept praise.
18 years later, at Stratford, you did new versions of Macbeth and Coriolanus. Did you change your approach to the parts at all?
Not in Coriolanus. Not in Coriolanus. But Macbeth is another problem altogether. Macbeth is something which, I don't care how boss a shot you have of it if you're at it. I mean, if you're 27 years old. You can't do it. You can't do it, although you can recite it. You can go through the motions. You can give them a hell of a fight at the end. You can reach all sorts of poetic passages, perhaps. You can reach the humanities to a certain degree, but only to a certain degree, because you have to be of a certain age of life's experience to play parts as enormous as that. You have to know about humanity. You have to know a lot about human relationships. See, Macbeth is a domestic tragedy. It's, you must see in that, you must understand and perceive that Macbeth knows at once, the minute he sees the first witch, he knows what's going to happen. The interesting part of the play is that the man has imagination and that the woman has none. The man sees it all, she does not. That's what gives her the enormous courage to plot the whole thing, force him into it, persuade him, cajole him, bully him, tease him into it. And he allows himself gradually, bit by bit, to be teased into it. But he knows the answer. He knows the result, and she doesn't. And it's the passage of 2 people doing that. One going up and one going down. And there comes a moment in the play when he looks at her and he realizes that she can't take it anymore.
Have you found it difficult to find bits of yourself in the evil characters you played?
What you need to make up your makeup as an actor is observation, intuition. You must, at its most highfalutin, most highfalutin expression of it, the actor is as important as the illuminator of the human heart. He's as important as the psychiatrist or the doctor, minister, if you like. That's putting him very high and mightily. At the opposite end of that pole, you've got to find in the actor a man who will not be too proud to scavenge that tiniest little bit of human circumstance. Observe it, use it, find it, use it sometime or another. I've frequently observed things, and thank God I haven't got a very good memory for anything else, but I've got a memory for little details. And I've had things in my back of my mind for as long as 18 years before I've used them. And perhaps in those little tiny things may be the key to a whole characterization.
We're going to look now at a scene from the film of Richard III. It's the scene after Richard has successfully made love to the widow of one of his victims.
Was ever woman in this humor wooed? Was ever woman in this humor won? My dukedom to a widow's chastity I do mistake my person all this while. Upon my life she finds, although I cannot, myself to be a marvelous proper man. I be at charges for a looking glass, and entertain some score or two of tailors to study fashions to adorn my body. Since I am crept in favor with myself, I will maintain it to some little cost. Shine out, fair sun, till I have bought a glass, that I may see my shadow as I pass.
Did you know at the time that that was going to be one of the key performances of your career?
No. No. A lot of things contributed to it. I said, talking about scavenging just now. One thing that may lead an actor to be successful in a part, it may, not always, but may, is to try to be unlike somebody else in it. At the time when I took over that part, first of all, Donald Wolfett had made an enormous success in the part, only 18 months previously. And I didn't want to play the part at all, because I thought it was much too close to this colleague's success. And I had seen it. And when I was learning it, I could hear nothing but Donald's voice in my mind's ear, and see nothing but him in my mind's eye. And so I thought, this won't do. I've just got to think of something else. Well, my first thought, I'd always had images, pictures. I'd heard imitations of old actors imitating Henry Irving. And so I did right away an imitation of these old actors imitating Henry Irving's voice. That's why I took that rather sort of narrow kind of vocal address. Then I thought about looks. And I thought about the big bad wolf. And I thought about a director under whom I had suffered in extremis in New York called Jed Harris. The physiognomy of the big bad wolf was said to have been founded upon Jed Harris. And so, hence the nose, which originally was very much bigger than it was finally in the film. And so with one or two extraneous externals, I began to build up a character, a characterization. I'm afraid I do work mostly from the outside in. I usually collect, whether consciously or unconsciously, I usually collect a lot of details, a lot of characteristics, and find a creature swimming about somehow in the middle of them.
When you were playing Richard, was there a moment when you knew you were there, that all was set fair for your future?
Well, I'd been on the stage now just 20 years. I'd just finished making Henry V. And I don't know how or why. I just went into it with the same distrust of the critics, the same fear of public opinion as I'd always experienced. I went onto the stage, frightened, heart beating, came on, locked the door behind me, approached the footlights, and started. And I just simply went through it. I don't think anybody in the company believed in the project at all. I think everybody was rather in despair about the whole production. And nobody particularly believed in my performance. None of us particularly believed in any of our performances in it. And so I didn't know. I didn't know. I was just once more going to have, as we say, a bash. I had developed this characterization. I've got a lot of things on my side. Now I come to think of it from the point of view of timeliness. One had Hitler over the way. One was playing it as definitely as a paranoia, so that there was a core of something to which the audience would immediately respond. I fancy, I may be quite wrong, but I fancy to companion this idea, I sort of possibly filled it out, possibly enriched it a bit with a little more humor than I dare say a lot of other people had done. I'm not sure about that. But I only know that I read a few notices next morning. Of course, drank a little bit too much. And my next performance was the next day, matinee, to which I was all too ill prepared. And there was something in the atmosphere. There was something, people talk, there is a phrase, the sweet smell of success. And I can only tell you, I've had 2 experiences of that, and it just smells like Brighton and oyster bars and things like that. As I walked onto the stage, I felt this thing. I felt for the first time that the critics had approved, that the public had approved, and they'd created a kind of grapevine, and that particular audience had felt impelled to come to see me. And it was an overwhelming feeling, a head-reeling feeling. And it went straight to my head. And I felt a feeling I'd never felt before, this complete confidence. I felt, if you like, which is necessary for an actor to feel finally, I felt a little power of hypnotism. I felt that I had them. And it went to my head, as I said, to such an extent that I didn't even bother to put on the limp. I thought, I've got them anyway. I needn't bother with all this characterization anymore. It's an awful story, really.
In the 1945-6 season, there was Oedipus. And I can remember a very voluptuous notice that I wrote of that, in which I was trying to answer some of your critics at that time who were saying that you had tricks, you had vocal mannerisms and physical mannerisms, and I was saying that these tricks may exist, but that they were unique and only you could pull them off. Do you think you have mannerisms?
I'd like not to think so, of course. I know I have, because I see them, and when they're pointed out, I feel them.
Such as?
Well, what are mannerisms? Mannerisms are cushions of protection which an actor develops against his own self-consciousness. An actor comes onto the stage on a first night and does something, hangs his head or does something or other. And for that second, it's a comfort to him, what he's done. It gives him a little moment of reality at this terrifying moment. And it goes into the works. And in the future, if he's not very careful, he resorts to it on any first night. And those things collect and collect up. And you've got about 24, 37 things that you finally can't do without. Those are mannerisms.
We're now going to see a scene from the unreleased film of the Old Vic Othello. It's the scene in which, well, it's halfway through the great jealousy scene where Othello is really beginning to believe Iago's lies about Desdemona's infidelity with Cassio.
False to me. To me!
Now, General, no more of that.
Don't! Become! Thou hast set me on the rack. I swear 'tis better to be much abused than but to know it a little.
Now, my lord.
What sense had I of her stolen hours of lust? I saw it not, thought it not, it harmed not me. I slept the next night well, was free and merry. I found not Cassio's kisses on her lips. He that is robbed not wanting what is stolen, let him not know it, and he's not robbed at all.
I am sorry to hear
And being happy if the general camp, pioneers and all had tasted her sweet body, so I had nothing known. Oh, now, forever farewell the tranquil mind. Farewell content. Farewell the plumed troops and the big wars that make ambition virtue. Oh, farewell. Farewell the neighing steed and the shrill trump, the spirit-stirring drum, the ear-piercing fife, the royal banner, and all quality, pride, pomp, and circumstance of glorious war. And oh, you mortal engines whose rude throats the immortal Jove's dread clamors counterfeit, farewell Othello's occupations. Gone! Milan, be sure thou prove my love a whore. Be sure of it. Give me the ocular proof, or by the worth of man's eternal soul, thou hadst been better have been born a dog than unto my weight from. Come to this. Make me to see it, or at least so prove it that the probation bear no hinge nor loop to hang a doubt upon, or woe upon my life. If thou dost slander her and torture me, never pray more. Abandon all remorse. On horror's head, horrors accumulate. Do deeds to make heaven weep, all earth amazed. For nothing canst thou to damnation add greater than that.
Let's talk about Othello a little bit. At the beginning, you were very reluctant to play the part at all. Why was that?
Well, I knew it was a terror. I knew from past experience that it was almost impossible. When I was on tour in Europe one time, I was doing Titus Andronicus, and Anthony Quayle was playing Aaron. And we had a little interval together. And one day he said to me, "Is this a very bad one for you, this Titus Andronicus?" And I said, "Yes, awful, awful." I said, "But you've played Macbeth too. I think you'd agree that Macbeth is the worst." And he said, "You haven't done the black one yet, have you?" And I said, "No." "Why is that terrible?" He said, "Terrible. The most difficult ones to bear are the ones that are complaining all the time. The ones that moan. Macbeth is all right because he's positive." He said, "But you know what you hate about Titus? He's always going, ooh, ooh, oh, look at, ooh, fancy them doing that to me. Oh, oh, oh." And how many ways are there of saying oh, oh, and it's very tough on your imagination. It's very tough on your resourcefulness of variations of all kinds. And therefore it's also a very great strain physically. He said Othello was all of that, and you have to black up as well.
When you came to play Othello yourself, did you feel physically equipped for it in every respect?
No, I didn't. That was another thing that had troubled me. I didn't think that I had the voice for it. I've just, listening to that excerpt, I wouldn't say I had yet either. But I did go through a long period of vocal training, especially for it, to increase the depth, the deep registers of my voice. And I did actually manage to attain about 6 more notes in the bass. And from the physical point of view, I went through, and I still do, a very severe. And from the physical point of view, I went through, and I still do, a very severe physical training course.
What was the conception of the part, though, that made it perhaps different from the conventional Othellos that we're used to seeing?
Well, you know, there's a very rough estimate of the theme of Shakespearean tragedy. You know, it's so easy to say, and it's constantly said, and it's roughly good enough, that Shakespearean tragedy is founded by Shakespeare upon the theme of a perfect statue of a man, perfect statue. And he shows one fissure in the statue and how that fissure makes the statue crumble down and disappear. into utter disorder. Well, from that idea, you roughly get that Othello is perfect, except that he's too easily jealous. But there seems to me, and that has grown in me, a conviction over the last few years, that in most of the characters, not all, but in most of them, that weakness is accompanied by the weakness of self-deception as a companion fault to whatever fault may be specified by the character in the play. And it's very easy to find in Othello. And once you've found it in Othello, I think you have to go along with it. If you believe, as I do, as I try to show, and I think I do, that when he says, not easily jealous, it's the most appalling bit of self-deception. He's the most easily jealous man that anybody's ever written about. The minute he suspects or thinks he has the smallest grounds for suspecting Desdemona, he wishes to think her guilty. He wishes to. And the very first thing he does, almost on top of that, is to give way to the passion, the temptation of, I suppose, the worst passion in the world, which is murder. He immediately wants to murder, immediately. Therefore, he's an extremely hot-blooded individual. He's an extremely savage creature who has kidded himself and managed to kid everybody else all this time that he's nothing of the kind. And if you've got that, I think that you've got rid of the basis of that character.
Your excursions into contemporary plays, things like The Sleeping Prince by Mr. Rattigan, John Osborne's The Entertainer.
I adored The Entertainer. I think it's the most wonderful part that I've ever played.
Archie Rice was influenced by a Negro blues singer. Are there any actors who've influenced you to that degree?
Yes, lots of them. I've mentioned Fairbanks, Barrymore, whose Hamlet I first saw when I was 17 years old. Noel Coward, in this way, influenced me a great deal. He lent me a very stern professionalism. Of all people I've ever watched with the greatest delight, I think, was in another field entirely, was Sid Field. I wouldn't like anybody to think that I was imitating Sid Field when I was doing The Entertainer.
Well,
because,
there were little things in it.
Little things, but Sid Field was a great comic, and this man is a lousy one. But I know when I imitate Sid Field now, to this day, I still borrow from him, freely and unashamedly. I watch all my colleagues very carefully, admire them all for different qualities which they have. And I think the most interesting thing to see is that an actor is most successful when not only all his virtues, but all his disadvantages come into useful play in a part.
You developed into the kind of actor you were when there were no real permanent ensembles, subsidized ensembles in this country. Do you think you'd have developed in the same way if you'd joined a company like the one you have now at the Old Vic when you were beginning?
Well, in a way, from time to time, that has been so with me. From my earlier, the Birmingham Rep, I was there for 2 years, or 2 seasons. I was at the Old Vic for 2 years. I was with Ralph. We engaged with work for the new Old Vic at the New Theatre for 5 years. We tasted the blessings of a permanent troupe. We saw, one can see, when a foreign company who is used to the idea of a permanent ensemble, such as the Moscow Arts Theatre, when they arrive upon our shores and we see their work, it is that hot breath of unity that whenever I've seen it all through my life, sometimes quite rarely, but whenever I have, has always seemed to me to be more important than the star system. It is more important to an audience, ultimately, than the star system, though goodness knows how many years it's going to take us to make that clear to them. But it must be made clear to them.
When you were first asked to be director of the National Theatre, was this the first thought in your mind, to create that kind of sort of company?
Yes. Oh, yes, because I had, in smaller ways than this, I had formed companies before, and next to directing a film, which I'm sorry to have to say is the most exciting thing I've ever done, but next to that, forming a company, helping it along, serving it, leading it, if you like, not necessarily so. That's the most exciting thing I think a man can do.
At the Old Vic, of course, you're an administrator and an actor, and you direct plays. Do you find being an administrator interferes with the active theatrical work?
I think I act and direct all I need to, all I want to. I love the job. I was very frightened of it when I started it, but I looked around as honestly as I could, and I hope without self-deception. And I thought that probably was perhaps the fellow with the best sort of experiences to start the thing going. And I was determined that there should be a national theatre in our country. I think the theatre is probably the only way of making the theatre a part of people's lives. It'll take a bit of time.
Is there a special sort of actor you were looking for when you formed the National Theatre Company?
Very good ones. Very good ones. Versatile ones. People had their heart in the right place about it. Unlazy ones. Deeply enthusiastic. Courageous. Gifted with all sorts of attributes. I must say that the nature of the work, as I've said before, does demand physical, not perfection, but physical prowess. When you get an actor who is gifted with immense strength, his coordination is so much better than a weedy type of an actor.
Our situation here now is that we've got plenty of openings for actors in this country. Our subsidized theatre's opened up so much. But if you could look ahead, say, 5 or 10 years hence, how different or what changes would you look for in our own company at the Vic?
I'd like better conditions, first of all.
Such as?
Sounds a better theatre, better conditions, in order to increase activities, so that eventually, perhaps, the art of the actor may finally be regarded as an important part of the life of the people.